There is a gateway into the sacred kingdom, not somewhere out there, but right where you stand. You do not need to travel far, nor gather any new knowledge. You need only to remember, within every person lies a divine creative faculty, long forgotten the imagination. When it is reconnected with the spirit, it is no longer merely a tool for dreaming, but becomes the doorway to creation, healing, abundance, and awakening. This 16-part journey is not here to teach you something new, but to lead you back to what you have always been, a bearer of the power of the divine mind, a living gateway through which the kingdom flows into the midst of everyday life, an invitation to the spiritual journey. Beneath every surface desire, there exists a deeper hunger that words cannot reach. It is not the need to have more, but the need to remember, not to step into a distant future, but to return to what has always been there. In the midst of the world's restless pace, there is a door that only opens when the mind becomes still. No hand can force it open, only a profound awareness can cause it to yield, and beyond that door is not knowledge, not theory, not even a savior from outside. Beyond it lies a kingdom not found on any map, without borders, beyond the power of anyone to give to you or take from you. That kingdom has always been within you, waiting for the day. You are still enough to see it. The key is not a religious ritual, not moral doctrine, not accumulated merit. The key is a faculty that every person possesses, though few truly grasp its worth. Imagination, not the kind used to flee reality, but the gateway back to your own divine origin, not to paint fanciful dreams, but to shape reality from the depth of the soul. When a person learns to use imagination in union with the light, they no longer live by habit. They begin to live as a deliberate creator, and that is the true meaning of being made in the image of God, not in body or form, but in the capacity to envision, to connect, and to bring forth. Imagination is the wellspring of all life that has ever come into being. Every great work, every invention, every masterpiece, every turning point in history, each was once an invisible image in the mind of someone. Imagination precedes all creation. Yet what few realize is that what exists in the inner world becomes the blueprint for the outer world. You are not simply reacting to reality, you are shaping it. And if imagination is the seed, consciousness is the soil, you cannot plant images of fear and limitation and expect life to yield love and peace. Just as you cannot plant thorns and expect roses, the divine law does not show favoritism, does not distinguish between the devout and the unbeliever. It simply responds to whatever image is held long enough with deep belief and strong feeling. Some imagine illness and live under its shadow day after day. Some imagine lack and spend a lifetime in scarcity. They do not realize they are not victims of circumstance, but architects of a world built from the invisible images repeated in their minds. And there are those who have learned to imagine the good, to hold bright images, to plant in silence, to water with faith, and one day their lives have become gardens of fruit. Thus, the first step is not hurried action, nor seeking answers outside. The first step is to pause, to turn inward, to see that there is a power that has never left you, not the small mind burdened with worry, but a deeper, quieter, clearer presence that has always been there. This place is not loud, not hurried, not in conflict, yet it sees through all things. It knows you have always belonged to the light. It knows you need not change your essence, only remove the mist that has hidden your true origin, and it waits patiently, without force, without judgment, reminding you with a gentle knowing that you have been one with God, and still are. The spiritual journey does not begin with a step of the foot, but with a moment of awakening. It does not require you to climb a mountain or cross a desert. only to touch again what has always been here. Imagination, given as a spark of the divine, when you direct it toward what is true, good, beautiful, and loving, it becomes a channel. And in that moment, you are no longer the seeker, but the one who remembers, no longer the student, but the revealer, no longer asking for light, but being the light in human form from that place. And you no longer need to run from the dark, for you understand that light is not something to be fought for, but something that naturally appears when the dust is cleared. And imagination is the sacred water that washes the eyes of the spirit, clean from the blindness of unawareness. This journey is not for the hurried. It is for those courageous enough to stop and truly look, not to blame the past, not to fix others, but to begin again from the only place where reality can be changed from within. And if you are humble enough to look there, you will see the door has never been locked. It only waits for you to knock in the right place. And you will not knock with words, but with the image you hold firmly in your mind, with the faith you place in what is yet unseen, with the love you pour into each quiet vision, and little by little, from the unseen space, a new world will begin to emerge, not because it was given to you, but because you chose to remember. The kingdom does not arrive as a condition, it appears as a truth that has always been, and imagination, when illuminated by that truth, becomes the bridge carrying your soul back, home. No rituals, no miracle required, only an image held in stillness with persistence and love. And then you will know the door was never closed. You had only forgotten where you kept the key. Imagination, the bridge between man and God. Have you ever wondered why some people, simply by their presence, can make a space feel warm, gentle, and filled with the inspiration to live? Do they carry a special kind of energy? Or perhaps they have discovered something that most of the world has forgotten, that something is neither vast intellectual knowledge, nor physical strength, nor even refined communication skills. What they have is a deep connection with the unseen, with the living creative force within them. And the bridge between the finite human and the infinite, between the forgotten soul and the divine source, is the imagination. Imagination is not something you use only in childhood. It is not merely a tool for daydreaming, but a sacred faculty given to mankind from the very beginning to cooperate with God's work of creation. When you envision with love, with truth, with goodwill, you are rewriting the fabric of this world from within. Every image you hold is an invisible seed. Every emotion you pour into it is water. And every action that follows is the sunlight that helps it grow. Within you is already a creative center, a place where everything you might call a miracle is simply the agreement between imagination and faith. Are you using that gift consciously? Do you often picture what you do not want, and then wonder why your life is filled with what you wish to avoid? Do you hold in your mind images of lack, of fear, of failure, of sickness? If so, it is not some God who is judging you. It is the law of imagination operating neutrally and steadfastly, returning to you the outcome of what you have silently sown. Imagination is not a temporary tool. It is a spiritual current, flowing constantly through human consciousness. You cannot stop imagining. You can only choose the direction of that current, either to illuminate or to burn. The one who does not know this will unconsciously envision the negative and produce a reality of adversity. The awakened one, who knows how to return, to realign the mind, to create bright images, will begin to witness wonders that once seemed impossible. Every creative act of God follows a process. Envision, feel, and then form. He does not impose. He imagines, and in that imagining, all things come forth. So it is with you. As a child of light, you inherit that ability. When you imagine consciously, in union with what is good. You are no longer a passive participant in life. You become a co-creator with the universe. Pause for a few seconds now and imagine something good, an image that brings you a deep sense of peace, as if it were already real. That feeling is not vague. It is the first step of a miracle. Hold it, protect it, then live as if you have already brought it into the world. This is not pretense. This is honesty with your truest, most divine nature. Everything great, both material and spiritual, begins in imagination. A symphony was once an echo in the heart of a composer. A temple was once a shadow in the mind of a stonemason. A healing was once a steady assurance in the soul of the sick. Nothing happens by chance. All things are the result of mental images held with faith and love. Therefore, what you imagine is not private. It is an act that affects the world. When you envision what is good, you send a benevolent vibration into the shared space. When you hold a bright image, you help plant a new stream of energy into the collective. When you imagine peace, love, healing, and abundance, you are helping to create a wave of higher vibration. And now, if you are sitting somewhere quietly reading these words, you know that you are not just a receiver of this message, you are participating. Your silent presence is feeding the energy of transformation by asking in your heart, what am I imagining? You have already opened the first door. And from this moment, you can choose to sow again, to sow differently, to sow consciously. Do you dare to imagine a different life? A life not of mere survival, but of service. Not of fear, but of creation. Not of running away, but of living in presence. If that stirs your heart, you have just touched the most sacred part of yourself. And I thank you, for in a world still full of chaos, you have chosen to listen. You have chosen to look within. And perhaps you have begun to remember the greatest gift you were ever given, imagination. The bridge between you and God. No one can replace it. No one can take it from you. It belongs to you. And you are being invited to use it as a channel of light for this world. Imagination, the living prayer. Imagination, when used consciously, is not merely a tool for creation. It is the highest form of prayer. It needs no words, no ritual, no formal structure beyond an image, held steadfast with unwavering faith and deep feeling. In that moment, the human soul communes silently with God, not through speech, but through a vibration in harmony with eternal truth. One who knows how to imagine rightly does not beg, for he knows he is creating. He does not need to repeat a request, for the image in his mind is itself the spiritual decree sown into the unseen. When you imagine what is good, you are not pleading for it to happen. You are affirming that it already exists in the deepest layer of being. And that affirmation, when held with calm and steady faith, moves through every level of vibration until it naturally crystallizes into the physical world. Faith, in its purest essence, is not hope. It is the clear awareness of that which is unseen but already real. When faith meets imagination, a divine union takes place. In that instant, you are no longer a limited human being. You become the channel through which heaven's intent is revealed. Everything you envision with purity and love begins to take on a life of its own in the invisible realm. What the eyes cannot see, what the ears cannot hear, yet the soul perceives with certainty. These are the true seeds. And prayer, in its truest form, is the planting of such seeds in stillness, then living as though the harvest has already come. God does not need your pleading. He has already given you everything. The only requirement is that you remember the power you have been entrusted with. When you imagine in fear, you unconsciously use that power to construct shadows, but when you imagine in love, You are reshaping the world. You need not speak a single word, only hold the right image in mind. As a master craftsman holds the design before ever touching the material, for what you hold within is the blueprint the universe uses to weave circumstance right. Imagination is prayer, unbound by language. It transcends all religious boundaries, all doctrinal frames. It is the natural heartbeat of the soul when it remembers its divine origin. It depends on no external condition and needs no validation from the world. When you envision the good and feel it as truth, and you lay the foundation for its manifestation, not through sudden magic, but through the orderly unfolding from the unseen to the seen, according to divine law. Many pray with their lips, but imagine with fear. They long for healing, yet still picture a frail body. They ask for abundance, yet hold the image of themselves in lack. And then they are disappointed, believing their prayers were unheard. But God is not moved by sound, he responds by law. And the law always works with the image held together with faith. When you understand this, prayer becomes not just a moment, but a way of living. Every image you hold is a prayer. Every time you choose to picture the light rather than the dark, you are turning your heart toward the true source. And when that becomes your habit, your entire life becomes a living prayer. There is no limit to what you can envision in union with the soul. Healing love can be planted into a situation that seems hopeless. Light can be pictured in the densest darkness. Peace can begin from a single silent image held steady in the midst of violence. And from there, new circumstances begin to unfold, not because you forced them, but because you aligned yourself with the divine law of life. Every teaching from the true spiritual masters comes back to this. When Jesus said, "Believe that you have received what you ask for," he was not instructing you in the art of begging, but in the art of seeing in the mind, seeing through faith, seeing with the inner light. For what you see at the deepest level will one day take form in the outer. True prayer is not the striving to obtain, it is the art of living in the awareness that what you desire already exists, and your task is simply to hold it as real. Imagination, when pure, becomes the wordless voice between you and God, a whisper softer than the wind, yet stronger than all the pressures of the world. And once you learn to imagine rightly, you no longer need to speak much. You do not need to argue. You do not need to prove anything. Life itself will prove it for you, because what you have held long enough in silence will one day speak in visible form. Then you will understand that you are not merely one who lives in the world, you are one who weaves the world from the unseen with a sanctified mind. And that is the greatest prayer, not clothed in words, but charged with creative power greater than any sermon, without form, yet transforming the whole stream of life, hidden from display, yet touching the sacred depth where all things are born. Imagination, when guided by love and truth, is where prayer becomes life itself. The first gift after life is imagination. When God created man and breathed life into him, the first gift was not form, nor speech, nor intellect. The first gift after the breath of life was imagination, for life was not given merely to exist, but to create. And imagination is the first instrument the soul uses to bring the unseen into the seen. It is the breath that follows life itself, the quiet inner power that connects man to his divine origin. When Scripture says man was made in the image of God, it is not only a beautiful metaphor, it is a precise truth. That image is not found in the body, but in an inner faculty, the ability to envision, to design, and to shape reality from the depths of consciousness. It is imagination that allows man to begin with a spark in the mind and guide it into manifestation in the physical world. You can look at everything humanity has created, from a home to a symphony, from a field to a city, from towering structures to the simplest acts of kindness. All of them were once an inner image, nurtured by feeling, sustained by faith, and gradually shaped into form through action. Nothing you can touch today was not first an unseen idea yesterday. This is just as true for spiritual transformation. Every step of awakening, every act of healing, every moment of renewal, every life changed. Each began with a fresh imagined picture held long enough in the silence of the mind. One who has lived in shame, if they can hold the image of their worth long enough, will begin to live accordingly. One who has been ill, if they persist in holding the image of a whole and strong body, will awaken a process of healing from within. Imagination is not merely a tool. It is the spiritual interface between the human part and the God part within each person. Used unconsciously, it produces a chaotic reality. Used consciously, in harmony with goodness and truth, it becomes cooperation with the divine will to bring perfection from the soul's realm into the world. In all of God's acts, nothing happens by accident. When he said, "Let there be light," it was not simply a command, it was the perfect envisioning of light. Held in the divine will, light appeared not because it was forced, but because it had been fully imagined and felt as already real. And man, when living true to his original nature, carries the same capacity. When you say within, "Let there be peace," and you picture peace spreading through your life, you are using imagination for the sacred purpose for which it was given from the beginning. Nothing in your life happens at random. Every condition is the result of a series of mental images you have created, sometimes consciously, but more often unconsciously. Therefore, if you want to change reality, you do not need to rush or to fight. The first step is to pause and look inward. What images are you nurturing each day in the quiet of your mind? Are you letting your imagination drift under the pull of fear, or are you offering it up in service to the light? Imagination in itself is neither good nor bad. It faithfully reflects whatever you hold within, like fire that can warm or destroy, like water that can nourish or drown. Imagination is a neutral energy, but exquisitely sensitive to the direction you choose, guided by faith, love, and truth. It becomes a force for renewal, ruled by fear, doubt, and shame. It will mirror those shadows back to you. Understanding this is the foundation of freedom. You are not bound by your past or your circumstances. You are bound only by the images you have not yet released. And you are set free simply by sowing new and rightful images and holding them with loving persistence. There is no limit to what you may envision, so long as it aligns with divine truth. One who imagines good for themselves will naturally radiate that good to others. One who holds a bright image for another is helping to lift the vibration of the whole. Right imagination not only heals the individual, it opens a collective path toward the light. When you realize that the first gift after life is imagination, you begin to use it as a sacred act, no longer a means of escaping reality. It becomes the channel for recreating it upon the foundation of light. And when you walk with a true image fed by faith, nothing can keep you from bringing goodness into the world, for you are no longer living as one who tries to control life, but as one who co-creates with the very author of life, the first law of creation. The image brings the form. Nothing in this world is ever brought forth from nothingness. Every form you see, touch, and feel is the final result of a pattern that first existed in the unseen realm. The first law of creation is not action, it is image. Before matter appears, there is a template held in the mind, and that image, when supported by feeling and faith, moves through a process of formation. growth, and ultimately embodiment. This is not a poetic idea, it is a spiritual principle, as exact and unerring as gravity, which holds all things to the earth, whether you believe in it or not. What you think upon with focus, what you picture repeatedly with strong emotion, will inevitably begin moving into your lived experience. There is no need for pleading, no need for hurry, no need for worry, only a mental image held steady. And it will begin to seek its way into outward expression. The image does not live only in your mind. It radiates energy, draws together unseen forces, and assembles circumstances, people, and environments suited to its manifestation. Many live in fear without realizing they are imagining that fear every day. They wonder why failure repeats, illness lingers, or relationships keep breaking down. Yet they do not see the negative images they continually nurture in silence. They call it reality. But that reality did not come from outside. It came from the invisible patterns within, repeated in imagination, in words, in emotions, and in daily reactions. No one is punished by God. A person is only punished by the false image they have held too long and too strongly. Likewise, no one is rewarded by luck. A person is lifted because they have learned to hold the right image with love and tireless persistence. Imagination is the instrument you use every single day. Whether you are aware of it or not, every time you envision something with clear feeling, you are signing a spiritual contract for it to take form. When you think of lack, you send out a signal that summons it. When you picture illness, you invite it to dwell in your body. When you imagine failure, you set the blueprint for it to arrive. But when you hold the image of health, of abundance, of peace, and of love, you activate a higher vibration capable of bringing forth a good reality. You cannot reap what you have not sown. The law does not permit it. And what you sow is not action first. It is the image in your mind. Every thought held long enough becomes an image. Every image held deeply enough becomes a pattern. Every pattern held firmly enough becomes reality. This is why the root of creation is not the hands, but the mind, not physical action, but the mental picture. When you grasp this, you no longer live passively. You no longer ask what will happen. You know what will happen depends entirely on what you are holding inside. You become a conscious creator rather than one who merely reacts to circumstances. The law of image is impartial. It does not care who you are, where you come from, or what your past has been. It responds only to this principle. The image held with faith will produce a corresponding form. Just as soil does not ask whether the sower is rich or poor, good or bad, it simply nourishes the seed placed within it. The universe works the same way. It nurtures the image you hold with feeling and belief. Therefore, if you wish to change anything, turn back and examine what image you are holding in your mind. Do not fight the circumstance, change the blueprint. Stop imagining what you do not want. Begin sowing the right images. Sow with awareness, with love, with reverence for the sacred law of creation. You do not need long prayers. If the image you hold is clear enough, the feeling you place in it real enough, and the faith you walk with steady enough, what you seek will take form. Not because a miracle has fallen from the sky, but because you have aligned with the divine structure of life. What you think upon when your eyes are closed, what you envision in your silence, what you feel as present though unseen, this is the seed of all you will one day call reality. Do not dismiss it. Do not call it wishful thinking. This is the place where the real world is formed, and the image you sow rightly, the world will answer rightly without error, without delay, without lack. This is the first law of creation. The law never fails. The divine creative act in Genesis Every true act of creation begins not with the hands, but from an unseen space where consciousness meets spirit. The book of Genesis is not merely an ancient story of how the universe was formed. It is a spiritual map describing precisely how all life is created in every age, within every human being. Each statement in that book is not only a record of the past, but a reminder of a present process unfolding quietly within you. And the very first words of God that stirred every level of existence were, "Let there be light," not the shout of force, but the pure envisioning born of divine consciousness, not an outward command, but a perfect image established in the eternal mind. And in that image, the light appeared. This is the crucial point. So few understand. Creative action is not interference, not the forcing of the material world to change, but the release of an inner image so precise, so whole, that it cannot help but take form. It is not the human will, but the voice of divine life speaking from the deepest level. This is the power of the voice within, not merely a sound you hear, but a space you return to. It is not an echo through the ears, but a field of awareness you enter whenever you cease striving and begin to see again with the eyes of the soul. God does not create with hands. He creates with image. He does not mold each blade of grass, each star, each wave. He envisions them, and in that complete seeing, the universe arises as the natural response of perfect love and wisdom. When you envision with love, you do not need to command anything to appear. You need only to hold that image with faith and consistency. And all the forces of life will begin to move to fulfill what you have already seen within. When you say, "Let there be light," in your mind, you are not imitating a ritual. You are stepping into the very law of creation that has been from the beginning. The image you hold, if kept with constancy and love, will resonate with the same frequency as the image God once held when he brought forth the first light. And in that resonance, what you see within will begin to take shape. Without, the entire universe is the result of divine imagination formed in the perfect agreement between mind and love, and you, made in the image of the Creator, possess the same capacity not to build a private world for the ego, but to reveal the facet of truth through your own lived experience. When you imagine a life of peace and hold that image unmoved through adversity, you are using imagination as God used it. When you picture a healthy body in the midst of illness, you are not denying reality, you are reshaping it from its deepest foundation. You are speaking in a language without words, declaring that you trust the light within more than the darkness without. This is not the rejection of pain, but the transcendence of it, not resistance to circumstances, but the resetting of the foundation from the spiritual realm, for every form is but the shadow of an image in consciousness. And if you are steady enough to change that image, the shadow must change with it. The divine creative act does not begin when you attempt to alter the world. It begins when you turn inward and ask an ancient yet powerful question. What image am I holding in my mind? Am I envisioning life as God envisions it? Or am I repeating the image of limitation, fear, and separation the world has handed me for so long? When you awaken to this, you stop chasing outcomes. You begin to tend the inner pattern. You step into the still space where words are no longer needed and only one image glows like a living prayer. You stop grasping for anything and simply rest in the truest vision your soul gives you. And then things begin to change, not because you forced them, but because you adjusted the deepest level from which all movement arises. Remember, light does not come because someone shouts loudly. It comes because someone is still enough to envision it with love. Creative action does not begin with the hands, but with consciousness and The greatest creative act in a human life is not the making of more things outside, but the returning to the space where all things are rightly envisioned, in complete silence, in unshakable faith, in unconditional love. This is the act God began, and it is the act you are invited to continue each day, not through noise, not through struggle, but through a bright image held firm in the sacred mind. In that image, new life begins. In that image, light continues to be born. The fall, when imagination turns away from the light. The fall is not the moment a human commits a sin and is punished by some distant authority. It is not a historical event locked in a mythical garden. It is a spiritual process that happens every day in the mind of anyone who loses union with the light. The fall occurs when imagination begins to operate apart from the divine source of light, when the inner image is no longer guided by love, a truth, and wholeness, but becomes driven by fear, doubt, and selfish desire. In the moment the soul drifts from its oneness with God, imagination does not stop. It keeps working. But instead of producing light, it begins generating darkness. Instead of expanding the good, it reproduces images of separation, limitation, conflict, and lack. The danger is not in imagination itself, but in forgetting. When a person no longer realizes that the image they hold has the power to shape reality, they allow distorted images to multiply in the unconscious. They believe they are reacting to the world, when in truth they are recreating that world from a broken pattern within. The story of Adam and Eve is not a verdict of guilt, but a metaphor for a spiritual choice. When humanity ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they stepped into a state of separation, not because knowledge is wrong, but because in that moment they began to imagine a world with enemies, judgment, fear, and the absence of unconditional love. And that image, when nurtured, gave birth to a reality no longer reflecting the kingdom within, but only the fragmented patterns of a divided mind. From that point, imagination became misused ground. It was no longer the channel of life, but the blind field producing illusions. People began imagining loss, so they clung. They imagined judgment, so they hid. They imagined guilt, so they lived in shame. Layer upon layer of such images formed a spiritual mask, covering the true nature that remained untouched within. No one was truly driven out of Eden. They simply could no longer see it, because their gaze had shifted from the center. They still carried the seed of life, but watered it with fear and doubt. And from such soil, the fruit could no longer be sweet. The fall is, in essence, the misalignment of imagination, when the divine creative faculty is drawn out of the current of truth and pulled into the whirlpool of illusion. Yet even in the fall, the wonder is that the soul still holds the seed of light. The presence of God has not vanished. It is merely veiled by the dense fog of false images. This also means that salvation is not a reward for the worthy, but a power available to anyone who chooses to turn back and correct the image they are nurturing within. The moment you change the vision, you begin to move out of the fall. When you stop imagining the dark and start feeding the image of light, you no longer live under the effects of separation. You are moving toward union. Each time you envision what is right, not only for yourself but for others, you participate in collective healing. Every time you look at someone and hold an image of their wholeness, even if they are not yet showing it outwardly, you help them break free from the fallen image they carry. Each time you reimagine a painful situation, but this time in light and understanding, you are dismantling the old picture and making room for a renewed reality. Salvation does not come from an outward act. It comes from the cleansing and reshaping of imagination. It is not a grueling journey, but a profound return. And in each step of that return, every false image is replaced by a true one. Every distorted memory is illuminated by truth. Every old emotion is infused with understanding and compassion. The beauty is that imagination has been waiting for you. It was never lost. It only needs to be restored, washed clean, and reconnected to the light from which it was born. When that happens, you will not have to force life to change. The world will naturally shift to match the image you hold. As a shadow changes shape when the light falls, again from the right direction. The fall is not the end. It is simply the stretch of road where you once forgot you were holding the key. And when you remember, when you use imagination, again as a channel of light, you place your hand on the door back to the sacred garden. No permission is required, only the courage to look at the image you now hold and to replace it with the true light. Then, the fall ceases to be a tragedy. It becomes the beginning of the journey of remembering the indwelling Christ, the source of every true image. Christ is not a distant figure to be revered through ritual. A Christ is a living presence, quietly breathing within every person, needing no invitation, demanding no recognition. The indwelling Christ does not come from outside, nor is he the product of religion. He is the spiritual origin planted in the heart of humanity from the very first moment the soul received the breath of divine life. Christ does not speak in words or walk with feet, yet he continually calls you home with a sense that is subtle, deep, and undeniably real. The source of every true image is not found in the analytical mind, but in the silent space where the indwelling Christ resides. From that place, images arise untouched by fear, ego, or social conditioning. They come like drops of light, simple, yet powerful enough to change the entire vibrational structure of the mind. When a person learns to be still, to close the noise of the world, to release the urge to control reality, and to turn inward with trust, then from that space the images of wholeness begin to appear. Christ does not shape images through force, but through love. He does not paint on the mind with commands, but with life itself. When an image emerges from the depth of that presence, it carries within it a sacred quality. You are no longer imagining through ego, you are envisioning in union with what is most divine in you. An image born from the indwelling Christ holds no division. It does not say me and them, us and others. It does not feed comparison, competition, or judgment. It simply reveals what is true, and truth does not need to argue. It shines enough to take form on its own. Every time you imagine something with deep love, not to control, but to allow life to reveal itself, you open the door for the indwelling Christ to guide the creative process. And the remarkable thing is that such an image will have a life of its own. You will not need to hold it, it will hold you. It will gently lead you toward the right decisions, the right feelings, the right actions, because you are no longer working alone. Christ does not impose anything upon you. He never overrides your free will. But if you are willing, if you offer your imagination as an open field, he will plant within it images that carry the essence of heaven. You will envision not out of fear, but from an inner safety. You will see the good, not because it is likely, but because you know deeply that good is the true nature of life. The indwelling Christ is the place from which all images of healing arise. No one can truly envision wholeness without touching that depth. Images born of the ego are often colored by personal need, veiled by past experiences, or confined by narrow beliefs. But images born from the depth of the indwelling Christ are clear, expansive, and universal. They not only show you the path you need to walk, they also change the way you see the world. You no longer imagine only your own rescue. You begin to see that every soul carries the seed of redemption. You no longer envision personal success alone, you envision the flourishing of the whole. This is the sign that you are no longer imagining from ego, but allowing Christ to imagine through you. in every age, awakened souls have carried the same tone. They see the world with a different set of eyes. They do not deny suffering, yet they refuse to let the image of suffering rule their sight. They are not blind to darkness, yet they keep a deeper image of light in their minds. Their strength does not come from rigid willpower, but from allowing the image of the indwelling Christ to reshape how they show up in the world. You do not need to do anything extraordinary to activate that presence, only a quiet decision. From now on, I will not let my imagination be dragged into the past or haunted by the future. I will offer it to the light. I will set aside time each day to be still, to wait, to receive images that do not come from fear or desire, but from the eternal love living within me. From that place, you will receive images that cannot be false. You may not understand them at once. They may not match what you expected. But if you hold them with faith, if you live in the direction they point, you will see your entire reality shift, not by force or control, but by harmony from the inside out. The indwelling Christ is not far from you. He is you, in your most original form, untouched by time, unbound by prejudice. When you imagine from that space, you are letting the divine shape your life. And the image born from that union will never be lost. It will continue to live, to shine, and to guide, because it is not the product of the mind, but the whisper of the soul in the deepest silence to which you can return. The spiritual law, the image within, gives birth to the form without. Nothing appears in life that was not first an image held in the mind. This is not optimistic thinking, nor is it mere emotional comfort. It is a law, an unchanging spiritual law. The image within is the invisible blueprint, and the form in the outer world is only the completed structure of that pattern. This is why every true transformation begins from within. And if you have not adjusted the image at the root, you will continue to recreate the same reality in different forms, no matter what changes on the surface. Every thought is not just a meaningless passing line, it is energy. And when that energy is fed through repetition, emotion, and belief, it condenses into a vivid mental image. That image is like a seed lying in unseen soil, waiting for the right fullness of time to sprout, grow, and appear as specific forms in your everyday life. A body, a circumstance, a person entering your life, a coincidental situation, all are the results of inner images that have existed before, sometimes long ago, sometimes not intentionally created, but stored by the unconscious. If you want to know what images live within you, simply look at your reality. You are living among what you once allowed to form in imagination. And if something keeps repeating in a puzzling way, a certain type of person, a kind of event, a familiar sense of being stuck, it is not because fate is trying to test you, but because the image has not been replaced. You are still feeding it, perhaps without realizing it. The spiritual law does not care who you are, how much you pray, or how moral you consider yourself. It operates only according to its design, the image that is clear enough, strong enough, and carries sufficient emotion will enter form. If you hold the image of sickness, fear, and limitation, even if you hope for the good, the law can only bring to you what you truly sustain within. On the other hand, if you dare to hold a higher, brighter image beyond the conditions, then even if the world does not respond immediately, life has already begun to arrange itself for that image to come forth. This is the root of all freedom. You are not forced to live by an old inheritance, not trapped in your current circumstances, not dependent on waiting for the world to change. You need only to change the image within, not by force or hurried effort, but through a deep agreement with the good, and little by little, Hallelse shifts. For the outer world is only a mirror. It has no power of its own. It reflects what you have already believed to be real inside. What is crucial to understand is that you cannot change form by hating it. You cannot escape the old by fighting it. For when you fight it, you are still imagining it. Instead, you must rise above by holding a new image clear, pure, and steady until it becomes the new magnetic field that draws all things corresponding to it. When you no longer fear, no longer doubt, and the bright image within you becomes more alive than any evidence from the world, then change is inevitable. This is also why no one can save you if you do not change the image you hold. A teacher may point the way, a sermon may open your eyes, an experience may stir your heart, but only you can form the new pattern in your mind. No one can do that for you. This is not a burden, it is a privilege. You were given imagination not to dream idly, but to work in harmony with the spiritual law to shape your life. You are no longer a victim of circumstances. You are the creator of circumstances through the images you choose to nurture. Christ said that if you have seen something in your mind, then it has already happened. For in the realm of the soul, there is no division between within and without, between imagination and reality. The image within is already a form of reality. It only requires time, energy, and agreement to appear in the tangible world you call life. And the wonder is that you can begin again at any moment, simply by planting a new image, truer, purer, closer to your divine nature. If you want to live a different life, do not start with action, start with the image. A new image will give rise to new feelings. New feelings will lead to new actions. And from there, the world will respond in an entirely new way, not because you have done something grand, but because you have adjusted the unseen foundation where everything begins. The spiritual law does not judge, it simply operates, and in its operation, you always have the choice. You can continue to reproduce the old, or you can begin to envision something entirely new, not as an escape from the past, but as a step into a present, reborn from truth. In that space, the image held in love and faith will become reality. No struggle is needed. No grasping is required. You need only to choose the right image and live as though it were already true. For in the eyes of God, you never imagine alone. True prayer is imagination in union with God. Prayer is not the pleading or persuasion of a distant being. True prayer is imagination aligned in deep union with God. When you pray without envisioning, you are only speaking, but when you envision with your whole heart, with reverent feeling, with the faith that you and the source are one, you enter a form of imagining with the power to shape reality. This is where the inner voice becomes alive, where prayer is no longer sound but absolute harmony between human consciousness and the divine spirit. This is the power of the voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. In that space, there are no words, only state. And that state itself is the truest prayer. In it, you no longer ask, you agree. You no longer doubt, you affirm. You no longer see yourself as separate from what you desire. You recognize it is already alive within you, waiting to be revealed through the image you hold in faith. When you pray, yet continue to imagine what you fear, what you lack, what you worry over. You are not truly praying. You are declaring to the universe that you believe the opposite of your prayer. And the spiritual law does not listen to your words. It responds to the state you hold. True prayer is not when you close your eyes. It is when you open your inner eyes to see a complete, clear, loving image and know it as truth. Imagination in union is when you no longer use the mind to sketch personal scenarios. You no longer form images to control, to possess, to rise above others. You envision as one who knows they are a channel for the divine will. What you imagine is not to serve the ego, but to reveal an aspect of the divine through the specific life you live. There is a sacred silence that accompanies this kind of prayer. You need not speak much, explain désir, or defend your view. You need only to enter that still space where you are no longer scattered by anxiety, by expectation, by the past, and allow the image to be born from the depth of connection. In that moment, imagination no longer works as a mental tool. It becomes the natural outflow of union. And in that union, the image you hold carries the vibration of truth. When you pray like this, you do not need to force yourself to believe, for you are no longer imagining from lack, you are imagining from being. You no longer play the role of one requesting something. You become one living in the state of it fulfilled. And the world, like a finely tuned mirror, will gradually reflect that image. It cannot do otherwise. Many are disappointed when prayer seems unanswered. Yet prayer is always answered, not according to the will of the intellect, but according to the image truly held within. If you ask for peace, but still nurture the image of worry, the spiritual law can only reflect what you hold, not what you speak. If you pray for healing, yet daily envision illness, the body cannot rise to another vibration. True prayer is the aligning of your whole mind, feeling, and imagination with the good that has been sown from the divine heart. No separation remains between the one who prays and what is prayed for. No boundary remains between what is desired and what exists. All becomes one life in motion, from image to form, from inner to outer. When you pray rightly, you will sense a particular peace, not because you are certain things will unfold exactly as you want, but because you know you are standing in the right place, holding the right image, in the right state. From that state, you need not cling to the outcome. You simply live in the image, letting it grow, root, blossom, and bear fruit in its appointed time. You no longer live in fear because the result has not yet appeared. You live as one who has received without display, without force, simply living. And in that living, all things arrive not sooner, not later, but precisely on time. For true prayer is not a way to change the mind of God. It is the path by which we adjust ourselves to be in harmony with His intention. And when the image within you matches the image already designed in the divine mind, the creation is no longer a mystery. It becomes the most natural process in existence. This is the power of the voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. When you return to that space, not only is the prayer answered, but you yourself are healed, not because the world has changed, but because you have stepped into another plane of vision where image and reality are no longer separate. From that place, you live not merely to obtain something, but to become someone, a pure channel of divine life creating through you, moment by moment, forgiveness, cleansing the imagination of toxic images. Forgiveness is not a noble act done for someone else. Forgiveness is an inner cleansing, a deliberate choice to wash your imagination free from the toxic images you have been quietly nurturing. Every time you hold on to a wound, every time you replay a memory with resentment, you are holding a distorted image in your mind, and it is that image, not the other person, that continues to shape your reality. Forgiveness does not mean denying the pain or justifying the wrong. Forgiveness is declaring to yourself, I will no longer let an old image create my new future. Asterisk. You do not forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because you deserve freedom. When you hold someone in your mind with anger, you are not only bound to them, you are allowing that negative image to become part of the invisible blueprint from which you are building your own life. Every image you hold in your mind sends out a vibrational signal. If you hold an image of someone as a bringer of pain, you are programming your imagination with tension. is fear and resistance. And when you imagine in that state, even unconsciously, everything you create from that image will carry the vibration of wounding. Forgiveness is not a moral gesture of kindness. It is a necessary act to purify the foundation of your imagination. You cannot create the good from a poisoned base. You cannot picture beauty if your mind still stores the image of hatred. An unforgiving mind is a mind that cannot imagine clearly. It is clouded by memory, by reaction, by fear of repetition. In that condition, even if you try to imagine a different life, what you call imagination is still filtered through a fog glass. Forgiveness is the act of wiping that glass clean. When you forgive, you are doing something deeply sacred. You are giving your imagination back its ability to see what is truly bright, uncolored by the past. How can you imagine something new if you are still seeing through the old lens? How can you live a free future if every vision you form pulls you back into a resisting memory? This is why many try to pray, to visualize, to affirm, yet their life does not change because the image they hold is still tied to an unhealed wound. And imagination, like a river, cannot flow freely when the channel is blocked. Forgiveness does not change the past. Forgiveness renews the present and opens a different future. It is the choice to acknowledge what happened and then consciously remove that image from your mind, like an artist erasing a wrong stroke to begin again. When you do this with love, you are not erasing the person, you are freeing yourself. And in freeing yourself, your imagination becomes light, spacious, and capable of producing images that are more beautiful and more clear. Some carry pain for years, thinking it protects their dignity. But in truth, they are chaining themselves to an outdated image. And each time they recall it, the image reactivates, bringing old energy into the present. This robs the imagination of its freedom to create. It can only recycle the past, changing its outer form, but never transforming its foundation. Forgiveness is an unspoken prayer. When you forgive, you are telling the universe, I am ready for a new image. I am ready to live from a higher vibration. I no longer identify with the old picture. Asterisk. And when that happens, you do not have to force your life to change. Life will begin to respond to the fresh, clear image you are holding. Forgiveness is not easy. It demands a strong decision and deep humility. But once you truly forgive, you will feel a lightness that comes from within, not from the outside world. It is the inner openness, the ability to feel life's beauty again without being bound by the past. It is the state in which your imagination is no longer pulled backward but lifted to flow again with the source of light. In forgiveness, you do not lose yourself. You return to your purest self. And from that self, you can draw any new image, a healed relationship, a peaceful life, a free mind, and a heart no longer stained by old memories. Forgiveness is not something you do once, it is a way of living, not holding on to false images, not allowing the old darkness to dim the light that wants to emerge. And in that state, your imagination is not only cleansed, it becomes the birthplace of images that are true, beautiful, loving, and carrying the quality of truth itself. For you are no longer imagining from a wounded mind. You are imagining from union with the light you have never lost, only forgotten at times. And in that remembering, all old images fall away, making space for a new reality to bloom from the depths of your soul. Faith and imagination, the wings that bring heaven to earth. Have you ever imagined something so good that your mind no longer doubted, your heart no longer feared, and your whole being seemed lifted by something not yet visible, yet strangely, undeniably real? If you have known such a moment, you have touched what we call faith united with imagination. Faith is not a vague optimism. nor a naive feeling in the face of difficulty. Faith is the most powerful spiritual energy entrusted to humanity, and when it is joined to rightly directed imagination, you are no longer merely picturing, you are bringing heaven to earth. Ask yourself this: the images you hold within, do you truly believe they are possible? Are you living as though they already exist, or merely hoping faintly? Your answer not only reveals the measure of faith you are operating in, but also the quality of life you are creating each day. If you have come this far, if you are still listening to the deeper layers of this spiritual journey, then I thank you, for it shows that within you there is already a field ready for the light to plant its seed. And here we enter the sacred union between faith and imagination, the divine pairing capable of opening doors no one thought were real. Imagination without faith is like wings without lift. You may sketch beautiful visions, you may dream of a perfect life, but without faith, the image hovers like a cloud that never touches the ground. Faith is the substance that gives a mental picture spiritual weight, the energy that enables it to move from your mind into form. Faith does not come from willpower. It cannot be commanded into being. Faith comes from union. When you merge with the image you imagine, when you no longer see it as foreign but as a natural part of yourself, faith begins to live in every cell. You no longer try to believe. You have become what you have envisioned. And in that becoming, you emit a frequency that cannot be mistaken. The universe recognizes it. The field of life recognizes it. Opportunities, people, and circumstances begin to resonate in a way no plan could orchestrate. The question is, with which image are you united? Do you imagine the good, yet bind your soul to an image of failure, limitation, or fear? Faith cannot operate in an environment pulled by two opposing forces. You cannot pray for light and then go out and live as though the dark is more real. You cannot affirm love in silence and yet keep bitterness in your heart. This is not moral judgment. It is the precision of spiritual law. Faith and imagination only work when they are one aligned to the same image, radiating the same frequency. A person of faith is not one who knows all the answers, but one who dares to hold a good image without evidence. In the material world, everything demands proof. In the spiritual realm, everything begins with feeling. You feel the image as right. You know it harmonizes with life. You do not need to defend it or persuade anyone. You simply hold it. And holding, in this sense, is not gripping it, is living in it, breathing in it, letting it become the inner climate of your soul. One with faith does not avoid reality, but does not let reality limit imagination. They see adversity, yet they refuse to nurture the image of defeat. They live among challenges, yet they keep the picture of the good, and from that place, the good begins to find its way into the world, not as a sudden miracle, but as the natural result of an image held steady by faith. Faith and imagination cannot be separated if you wish to practice spiritual creation. One is the light, the other is the open hand to receive it. One is the blueprint, the other is the current that brings the blueprint to life. When the two are one, you are no longer merely a seeker of truth. You become the place where truth is revealed. You no longer chase dreams. You live as though you already are what you once dreamed. And when this happens, you no longer ask whether it will come to pass. You know, and in that knowing, you are no longer in a hurry. You live with the calm of one who has seen a higher reality and knows that by holding the right image, maintaining the right vibration, all else will arrive in the most natural way. No force, no struggle, only living in faith, in imagination, in absolute union with God. For in the end, faith is not belief in what you want. Faith is the certainty that the divine is ever present, ever active, and that if you merge into that flow with a pure image, you will not only witness a miracle, you will become the miracle, living proof that heaven is not far away, but ready to appear in the very image you have believed enough to hold without wavering. Prosperity begins with imagination united with spirit. Prosperity is not the result of luck, nor a reward reserved for a chosen few. It is the natural expression of a mind whose imagination has become one with spirit. Wherever there is harmony between the inner image and divine law, abundance must appear, not because the person is better than others, but because they no longer create images that oppose the truth. When imagination no longer operates from fear but flows as a stream from unified awareness, prosperity needs no pursuit. It comes of its own accord as an inevitable outcome. Prosperity does not begin with a bank account, a stable job, or accumulated assets. It begins with an image you consent to in silence, not by mere words, but by the deep inner knowing that you are an inseparable part of God's overflowing life. When your imagination holds the image of abundance, not as a wish, but as an unquestionable reality, a wave of vibration goes out from that image, drawing to you all that corresponds in the realm of form. You cannot expect prosperity if you still carry within you the image of lack, fear, or limitation. Each time you imagine yourself as not enough, you are sending a spiritual signal that runs opposite to what you are asking for. And spiritual law, as we have said, does not respond to language. It responds to the image you sustain with the strongest emotion. This is why so many work hard and yet remain in want, because they act while holding an image of insufficiency. By contrast, those who truly live in the flow of abundance are those who have adjusted the level of imagery within their minds. They do not attempt to paint a false picture. They hold a clear, honest image, rich with gratitude. They do not imagine as an escape from circumstances, but as a way of cooperating with the divine mind. Imagination united with spirit does not create prosperity to serve the ego. It creates prosperity as the expression of divine order. In such a state, you no longer need to calculate anxiously, for every decision flows from an inner image that has been cleansed. Everything that comes into your life, a chance meeting, an opportunity, an inspired idea, reflects the degree of union between the image you hold and the life you are connected to. If, in your heart, prosperity feels at odds with spirit, you will always live in inner conflict. But if you see that prosperity is not extravagance, but the sufficiency to fulfill your soul's true purpose, then you will begin to imagine differently. From that new image, you will live differently, no longer grasping to get, but creating to reveal, no longer working from fear of lack, but acting from the awareness that you are the channel of an unfailing flow. Every coin that comes to you, every door that opens, begins with an image already formed within. If you wish to change your financial reality, do not start with the budget, start with the imagination. See yourself living in sufficiency, not because you must prove anything, but because it is natural when you no longer hold a false image of yourself. You are not a small being struggling to survive. You are the manifestation of spirit knowing itself through form. And once you realize this, the image you hold will change. And when the image changes, life will respond in a different way. Imagination is not daydreaming. It is the first spiritual act. And when that act comes from the level of union, free from the static of worry, untouched by the pull of memory, it has the power to reframe the entire structure of your life. A new job, a fresh stream of income, an idea that pivots your destiny, all are the natural results of a right image, held rightly in a mind that has been purified. Abundance is not confined to money. It is a field that permeates your life. You walk into a room and others feel generosity radiating from you. You sit in stillness and ideas come unforced because you are ready to receive. This is the mark of a prosperous mind where imagination is untainted by doubt and guided by spirit in union with the source. A truly wealthy person is one who can hold the right image of themselves and of the world, regardless of circumstances. From that image, everything necessary is given not as a reward, but as the natural revelation of divine law. So if you wish to step into a new season of prosperity, do not begin with a financial strategy. Begin with the image within. Examine what you are truly consenting to. And if you have the courage to change that image, not from lack, but from the realization of your true nature, then everything you need will find you gently, precisely, abundantly. This is the power of imagination united with spirit. It does not merely change your life, it changes you. And from the person you become, a new world is born not from effort, but from revelation, not from the outside in, but from the image you dare to hold within, with a steadfast knowing that you are never apart from the source. You are, in truth, the place where the source is creating most fully, healing the body as a mirror of the mind. The body never lies. It has no agenda of its own. It does not store memories the way the mind does. It simply reflects with complete honesty whatever you are holding within, every cell, every organ, every biochemical reaction is influenced by the images in your mind. Once you understand this, you no longer see healing as a process limited to the physical level. True healing begins in the invisible realm of imagery, where imagination not only creates the script for the future, but quietly shapes the health you experience in the present. A person who lives in fear over a long period will see it etched into their skin, their breath, their heartbeat, and their immune system. Someone who frequently imagines the worst will find their body weary, sluggish, overreactive, or disconnected from the flow of life energy. This is not because the body is working against them, but because it is faithfully reflecting the picture painted within. When you change the image in your mind, the body cannot help but respond. It is a neutral mirror with no choice but to manifest according to the instructions your mind provides. Healing is not the act of treating symptoms. It is the process of bringing the imagination back into harmony with spirit, thereby allowing the body to receive the correct flow of information it needs to function smoothly. When you imagine health not merely as something you wish for, but as a natural, inherent state aligned with your divine nature, you are sending a new message to every cell, and your body, like fertile soil, will begin to reorganize itself according to the seed image you plant. Many people are unaware of the image they actually hold of their body. They speak of wanting health, yet inwardly still carry the image of fatigue, anxiety, or helplessness. They may eat well, exercise, and rest, but deep down they still operate from the memory of pain, failure, or conflict. This is why outer changes often fail to bring lasting results, because the imagination has not been reset. The mental image of illness still occupies its place. Imagine what would happen if you began each day not by scanning for symptoms, but by setting the inner picture, the image of a body full of light, supple, flexible, wise, and naturally engaged in its own healing. You need not draw every detail. It is enough to hold the feeling of vitality, the sense of organs working in harmony, the awareness of connection to a higher current of life. You cannot separate the body from the mind. When your mind is filled with fear, the body braces itself. When you hold a positive image, the body relaxes. And that relaxation is the foundation for every recovery process. True healing does not come from strain, it comes from the removal of resistance. It begins when you stop fighting your body and start befriending it through an imagination attuned to spirit. This is not daydreaming. This is the deliberate resetting of biology through the spiritual plane. This is the power of the voice within, not just a voice you hear, but a space you return to. When you go back to that space daily, you begin to establish a new atmosphere for your entire nervous system. You stop trying to control everything with the intellect and start giving authority to an imagination united with spirit. From that place, your body, whatever it is carrying, will respond differently. Not instantly, but inevitably. For a right image, held long enough, will always outlast and overcome a temporary false appearance. You do not need to conjure anything grand. You simply need to stop feeding the wrong image. Stop speaking ill of your body, comparing it, judging it, doubting it. Instead, begin to observe, love, and walk alongside it as you would a loyal friend, doing its best each day to reflect what you truly believe. If you believe the body is where life itself dwells, it will slowly become a temple rather than a battlefield. If you imagine that each cell knows exactly how to function according to the good, that will become your reality. Healing begins not from the outside in every medical tool, every nutrition plan, every supportive method can only work fully when your mind is willing to cooperate. That cooperation starts with a simple image. I am living in a body designed perfectly by God, and my imagination is restoring its original blueprint through every thought, every feeling, every dream. You do not need to understand every biological mechanism. You need only to hold a pure image, and when that image is kept with faith and consistency, the body receives the right instructions. Blocked functions will be freed. Pressured areas will relax. Damaged cells will receive a new message. This happens not because you are micromanaging every process, but because you have attuned yourself to a realm where wholeness has always existed, waiting to be called forth by the image you dare to sustain. In the end, healing does not come from the outside moving in, it begins from the inside moving out. It begins with the image you hold in quiet, with the emotion you nourish each day, with the decision that you will no longer imagine through fear, but allow spirit to illuminate all things. And in that light, the body ceases to be a victim and becomes a living testament to the union of mind, imagination, and the divine light to which you have always been connected. Supreme awareness, you and the Father are one. You were not born to live as a separate being, lost in the chaos of this world. You are not a small soul struggling to cling to the love of a distant God. At the heart of all true awareness, there is a whisper that cannot be denied. You and the Father are one, not as two identical entities, but one in essence, one in spirit, one in the life that expresses itself through the form you call yourself. Every spiritual journey, every process of healing, every effort of prayer or visualization points back to this foundational truth, the truth that you have never been separated. You have only forgotten, and a distorted imagination is the inevitable result of that forgetting. When you imagine yourself as a small individual in need of help from outside, you send out a false signal. Any image conceived from the level of separation will only recreate more experiences of lack, struggle, and fear. But when you begin to imagine from the foundation of unity, when you hold the image of someone co-creating with God instead of pleading with Him, every vibration changes. You no longer envision as a beggar, but as a divine expression calling back what has been yours from the beginning. This unity is not a religious concept, it is a spiritual truth. When Jesus said, I and the Father are one, He was not speaking for Himself alone. He was revealing a deeper dimension to every soul, that your true nature is divine, inseparable from the source, the living presence of truth embodied in flesh. And if you live with that awareness, you will no longer feel the need to control the world. You will let the world move as it must, while you live from a steady center, knowing that no matter how appearances may shift, your essence can never be threatened. Imagination begins to operate differently when you hold this truth as your root. Every image you envision will no longer be a reaction against circumstances, but a deliberate expression from a mind harmonized with the cosmic consciousness. In this state, you need not speak many words. The image you hold is enough of a prayer. The feeling you cultivate is enough of an offering. The way you carry yourself is enough of a declaration of who you are within the greater self, not for others to see, but so you yourself never forget the unity. Every spiritual practice is designed to bring you back to the truth that you are an inseparable part of the divine mind. But this return cannot remain only in intellectual awareness. It must sink into the level of imagination, where you see yourself no longer as someone swept along by life, but as one co-creating with infinite wisdom, unconditional love, and a strength both gentle and unshakable. From that image, you will live differently, not because you try to be more virtuous, but because you have no reason left to fear or to control. You know who you are, and that knowing frees you from every psychological chain. Look back over your life. Every deep wound arose from the sense of being abandoned, separated, disconnected. But if you allow yourself to live from another foundation where you no longer see yourself as a lost child, but as a creative expression, upheld in every moment, then those wounds will have no reason to remain. You will not need them as proof of identity, for you have a greater identity, the one who remembers, I and the Father are one. From this place of unity, you no longer pray from lack, you pray to remember. You no longer act to prove you act because you know you have been given the authority to create from light. You no longer imagine to escape suffering, you imagine to manifest. And from that state, everything you do, I think, and feel carries the profound vibration of truth. I am not one standing outside the gates of heaven. I am the gate. And whoever passes through me, through one who is united, will taste the flavor of freedom. Unity does not need to be proven. It only needs to be lived. And to live in that unity, you do not have to do anything extraordinary. You only need to hold the right image in your mind, the image of a soul unblemished, never lost, never in need of repair, only in need of remembering. And in every moment you remember, you are returning not to a place, but to a state in which you know that everything you need is already within you. No one gives it. No one takes it away. For you are not separate. You need only live from that place every day with peace and wholeness. And that is the most powerful image your imagination can hold. For it is not just an image, it is the truth. Conclusion: imagination is the gateway to the kingdom. Everything you have ever sought outside has always been within you. Yet it waits for something to awaken it, to call it forth, to bring it into expression. That something is not knowledge, not action, not blind effort. It is imagination, not the wandering, feeble, uncertain kind, but imagination united with spirit, purified of fear, and restored to its rightful place within the structure of your soul. In that state, imagination ceases to be a secondary tool and becomes the sacred gateway that leads you back to the kingdom you have never truly left. This kingdom is not perched on some far-off cloud, nor promised only after a string of moral deeds. It is a state of awareness in which you live as though you and God are one. not to manipulate reality, but to live in alignment with it, not to escape hardship, but to stand in the midst of a shifting world while keeping the original light within you unshaken. Imagination is the gateway that carries you from the land of limitation into the realm of the limitless, from the tangled surface into the clear depths, from a person ruled by the world to a soul co-creating with God. If you imagine wrongly, you will drift into images that weaken you, shrink you, and fill you with doubt. But if you hold the right image, not by force of will, but by awareness, that image itself becomes the guiding lamp. The mechanism that calls forth matching conditions into the realm of form. You need not master all the laws. You only need to agree with them. And when that agreement becomes consistent, all that you once longed for will no longer be a goal, but a natural result. For the kingdom does not arrive because you strive to enter. It comes in the moment. You remember you are already within it. Look back over the journey you have traveled. From the very first steps, you were reminded that imagination is not idle dreaming, but the first act of creation. You have seen it at work in Scripture, in Genesis, in the teachings of Christ. You have understood that the fall occurs when imagination is cut off from its source. You have discovered how forgiveness cleanses false images, how faith joined with imagination opens new doors, how prosperity and healing do not arise from external effort, but from the restoration of the inner image. And above all, you have been led to the awareness that you and the Father are one. What then remains to be sought except to live from that place? From the very gateway you yourself are called to guard. Imagination in its united state does not labor endlessly. It holds one image, the image of you as a pure channel of life, where all good can occur, not because you have earned it, but because you are ready to remember. This readiness needs no proclamation. It shows in how you live, in how you keep stillness, in how you choose which images to hold and which to release. It shows in simplicity, in gentleness, and a quiet depth, like a stream flowing underground, unseen, yet nourishing the whole forest. If there is only one truth you carry forward from this entire journey, let it be this: imagination is the most sacred faculty of the spirit. And when you keep it united with spirit, you no longer live in reaction, but in expression. You do not need to fight the darkness. You need only to hold the light. And that light is the image you keep when you know you are not cut off from the source. When you hold that image, everything else finds its rightful place. The pieces of your life no longer scatter at random. They are drawn together, set in order, not because you control them, but because you have remembered the one thing that matters, who you are. And when you remember, you no longer wait for a gate to open. You are the gate. As you walk through the world, you no longer need slogans. Your presence itself declares what you believe. When you imagine, you no longer sketch visions for the ego, but allow God to go on creating through you, unhindered by fear, wounds, or control. This is the imagination of one who has awakened, and in that imagination, the kingdom is no longer something distant, but the most natural state of your being. The journey is complete, but you are not finished. From here, you need not seek the light. You have become the lamp. And if you ever ask what the first step is toward a more complete life, the answer is not a technique. It is simply this: hold the right image in your heart, the image of yourself as the expression of divine life, as the place where the kingdom can appear clearly, gently, naturally. And if you hold that image consistently, fully, without fear, you will have nothing more to search for you are already within the gate, and the gate has always been within you. You need seek nothing more. Everything has always been within you. Imagination is not a passing breeze, but a sacred stream that waters every layer of reality. When you hold the right image, pure, united with spirit. You do not merely change your life. You transform yourself, and when you transform yourself, the whole world must respond. Live as though you are inseparable from the source, for that is the truth. Imagine from the place where you are already one, and everything you have ever prayed for will find its way to you not as a miracle, but as the natural consequence of a mind that has returned home